Good morning. Good afternoon, actually. I never know what time of day it is. My name is David, and I work with TLC, and this is part two of a three-parter about giving presentations both live and on Zoom, and possibly for recording purposes also. The third part of the talk will cover technology for recording and giving presentations live, but we won't be able to do that till we get back into rec centers and things like that. So this segment is going to be about Zoom and what Zoom is and what it isn't and what it'll do for you and what it won't do for you. Now, we've been working on the privacy issue, and one of the main things is about telling people how not to be shown any more than they want to be seen. And I'm going to give the same disclaimer, but in my own terms. And it says, if you don't want to be shown on the video, stay muted. Don't talk and be muted. If however, you don't want anything to be shown, you should just not join the meeting. Just wait for the video, because that's the only way you're going to be able to guarantee that you actually are not there and your name is not shown and your image is not shown and your voice is not heard. Now, I'm going to be moving kind of quickly today because when I did this thing in a practice form, it was 50 minutes, and I'd really like to keep it to 45, and I've added a couple of slides. So if you miss anything, you can go back and review the video on YouTube after we posted it. I'm going to focus on desktops and laptops. Phones and tablets are okay for joining a meeting and sitting and watching while you're having a cup of coffee on your veranda, but they're not so good for hosting. So a lot of what I'm going to say is about desktops and laptops. If you don't know how to do something, the best thing you can do is search for it. YouTube has zillions of wonderful videos about a lot of subjects, many of which are like how to use Zoom correctly. Zoom's website has a lot of useful tools for how to do things. And the main message I'm going to give you today: good meetings, good presentations, good video all result from good planning and practice. All right, now we're off to the races. What is Zoom? Zoom is a video chat application. Chat was one of the first applications ever written for the internet. It was written in the early 70s, and all it allowed people to do was what today we would call texting, sending short messages to each other. As soon as video became available, of course, people wanted to do that. So at first it was texting, and then it was talking, and then it was video and talking. But it's a video chat app, and a bunch of the Facebook has something like this, and of course WhatsApp does, and Facebook does. Google has Google Chat, and of course there's the old standby Microsoft Skype. Zoom is free for casual use. Casual use means either two people for as long as you want, or more than two people for only 40 minutes. When you register, excuse me, for Zoom, you have to have an account. And there's two ways to do that. One is to use an email address and make up a new password just for Zoom, or you can log in using an already existing Gmail account or Facebook account. There's some other options. I don't want to go into it. When I do this, I have a Gmail account, and I just log in with my Gmail account, and Zoom and Google handshake and agree that I am who I claim to be, and I allow Zoom to use my calendar, and everything is great. The biggest problem Zoom had a few weeks ago, or a couple months ago, if you remember, there was some bad stuff talked about Zoom. The main thing was they didn't require people to have passwords, and people could basically crash their parties. Now passwords are the default. Always require passwords. Don't try to make it any easier on people than it already is, because it's extremely easy. Now, Zoom works basically like one of those old speakerphones that you used to see in the middle of a conference room. They look like a little octopus, all flat with sides sticking out. And what would happen was, if you had a conference room in San Antonio and another one in San Francisco, whoever talked last would get control. They would get the microphone, and the people in their room would only hear their voices, but everyone in San Francisco would hear that person speaking. So it would be kind of a competition, and it was pretty good, but sometimes people talked over each other. Effectively, that problem cannot really easily be solved. Zoom does the same thing, and what happens is, when you're watching Zoom and you're in gallery view, or even if you just got two images, you'll see a yellow outline around the image of the person who's currently the speaker. You'll also see some little yellow marks at the bottom of the window for people who are also making noise, and that tells you that Zoom is trying to figure out who really ought to be the speaker, and sometimes it'll make mistakes, but what it really means is people who aren't talking should stay as quiet as they reasonably can. Now, you don't have to schedule a meeting and make a big deal out of it and send email around. You can just send a text to somebody and say, hey, let's Zoom. And then you start a meeting and you invite them and they get an email and they click on it and bingo, they're in. So you can either do an immediate meeting or you can schedule a meeting. Scheduling a meeting is a little bit bigger in its structure because it has to put the event on people's calendars. Now, Zoom doesn't have its own calendar, so it leverages the calendar that you currently have. Most of us have either a Gmail calendar, Apple calendar, Google calendar, whatever. I'm using the Google calendar when I set up my Zoom meetings so that I send out the mail through Zoom, it puts it on my Google calendar, and I get to see it from there. It works with Outlook. The exact mechanics are a little different, but the idea is when you go to schedule a meeting, you fill out a little form that says when and what do you want to call it and how long does it last and things like that. And then when you say okay, it's going to jump over to your calendar scheduling application and let you fill in the details and do all the invitations. Now, Zoom does a very, very good job of figuring out what microphone and what speakers you want to use and what video camera you want to use. These are things that confuse some people, but luckily most systems, in particular tablets and phones, really don't have a lot of choices. They've got usually one choice. My computer, I have a couple choices for audio, but I only have one camera. But these are easy to change, and some details differ between Windows and Mac and tablets, and that's not a hard thing to understand. They are different, and I don't know them all well. That's why I'm focusing on computers. When you run Zoom on Windows, the first thing you see is this window. You see a big window with a date in it, and that's how I recognize it. It has a date and time, and it's got those nice green plants that look like aloe vera over there in the corner. At the top, you see some options: home, chat, meetings, and contact. On the left, you see great big buttons. New meeting means you want to start a meeting right now. Join means you want to join a meeting that you know about. Schedule means you want to set up a meeting. But the reason I'm showing all this is you see the green arrow in the middle of the just above the date and time. There's a green arrow pointing at a little icon that looks like a gear. That is a very important button. That is how you get to your settings. So I've just said most of this stuff. The gear icon is one of the main things we're going to talk about, and that hitting these buttons controls how you interact with Zoom. But once you start a meeting, you're going to get a different window, which I call the video window. But how do you get ready to start a meeting? Well, the main thing you do is you go to the settings. And before every meeting, and I mean everyone, even if you think you're an old hand and everything's going to be right, it's always worth the time and trouble to charge your device or make sure that it's charged. And I prefer and think it's better if you actually plug it in. Check your video image. Make sure that there's nothing being shown you don't want to see. Make sure you brush your teeth or whatever. Test your microphone and test your speakers. These are very, very important. Systems do vary, and some systems have more than one microphone. Most webcams, for example, have a microphone built in. So if you plug one into a laptop, other than or on a desktop computer, you might have two microphones, and you might be using the wrong one, or you might have it muted, or you might have turned your volume down really, really low and not be able to get it back. Check it. I highly recommend wired earbuds or Bluetooth headsets because they reduce the annoyance for others near you. They don't hear your the stuff coming out of your computer. Your voice typically won't tend to bother those around you. They know you. But the noises coming out of the computer can be very noisome. So I highly recommend you try wired earbuds or Bluetooth headsets. And Bluetooth headsets are really easy. You can fit them behind the head. You can be heard really easily because that microphone is either right in front of your mouth or right here at the side of your head, like with a phone. So you don't have to talk loudly, and the quality of your sound is great because it doesn't amplify ambient noise, as happens with webcam microphones and computer microphones. It's just better all around. But the point here is be ready for the meeting. You know, it's like riding a bike or driving a car. You don't go out there without checking for gas. Of course, I think most people don't check for gas anymore. When you click on the gear, what you see is this screen. And over on the left, you get to choose which type of settings you care about. I'm going to talk about the video settings a little bit. And all you do is click on the word video. on the left, and you see the big blue outline, which means that's what you're currently seeing. You choose the camera. If you have more than one, you'll get to drop it down. The little caret on the right-hand side where it says Camera Microsoft LifeCam, little caret will let you choose other cameras that may be available on your system. And then there's other options. You don't have to worry about those options. The main thing is just to check whether or not your camera is really showing you. Now, the audio settings are actually more complicated because there's two kinds. There's where it's getting your voice, which is the microphone, and the other is where it's sending the audio from everybody else, and that's the speaker. And this allows you to test the speaker. You can hear the speaker. It allows you to test the microphone and make sure that you're working. And you'll see that the volume indicator down there under test microphone will bounce up and down to show you that your microphone is actually working. Finally, I'm going to talk about recording today. So we're going to talk about recording options. And all that happens with recording really is at the end of your meeting, if you've chosen to record it, your recording will be downloaded from the cloud, from wherever Zoom keeps it, converted to a standard video file and saved on your hard drive. And that's very important. And I always check this option that says optimize for third-party video editor because I use a third-party video editor. I don't know why they said third party there, but you can choose where these go. And we'll talk a little more about this later. But I do believe it's important to learn how to do this, even if you don't actually do it, because we'll talk about why there are issues for every presenter about doing recordings, even if that presenter is not actually recording herself. This is what it looks like when you decide to schedule a meeting. What it's up at the top, it says, what is the topic? You put in whatever you want to say, and it defaults to put in my name, and it says Zoom meeting. You say when, you say where, you say the time zone, which is important because if you're inviting someone from California, you don't want to wake them up at 6 o'clock in the morning for a 9 o'clock meeting. You want to generate the meeting ID. You can actually put in a password, or you can have it make one up. And you should turn on your video or put in your computer audio, and then you have to choose the calendar. And this is really the one that's not intuitive. Typically what this means is, are you going to use a Google Calendar or an Outlook calendar? Because when you click schedule, it's going to jump over to your calendar application, okay? And I was going to stop at this point and talk a little bit about calendars, but I think I'm going to stop that right now. The main thing I wanted to say about calendars is just think about where you get your alerts that say, oh, you have to go to this meeting, or oh, you're supposed to call so-and-so. Is it from Apple on your phone? Is it from Outlook on your computer? Is it from Google? Or is it a combination? And that's the calendar application you ought to use. Now, when you send out a meeting invitation, other people will click on it to put it on their schedules. That's up to them. You're not controlling what calendar they use because they're using whatever calendar they find works for them. Remember that your calendar is up to you, but their calendar is up to them, and it varies how those calendars actually interact with Zoom. So now we're into the heart of actually having a meeting, and I'm having a meeting with myself, as you can see, with my COVID hairstyle. There are two primary windows that Zoom has. One was the one you saw a minute ago that had the plants and had the big buttons. This is what I call the video window, and it represents a single meeting. Zoom probably did this because they might even allow people to be in two different meetings. I don't know, but maybe one day they will. There are some very important parts to this window. At the top of my image, at the upper right-hand corner, it says enter full screen. That's what you tap on to make the video take over your screen, if that's what you want. On the right, there's a list of participants, and this is a meeting that I just started, and then I'm going to invite people, and their names will appear as they join the meeting underneath the participants list. Now, very, very important, at the bottom is a thing I call the toolbar. And that is the Zoom toolbar. And I don't mean the taskbar or the on Windows or the dock on a Mac. I mean the toolbar inside Zoom. It's usually not there, but if you wiggle the mouse over the video window, that toolbar will appear. And on the far left are some very important things. There's a microphone with the word mute on it, which allows you to mute and unmute. And there's a video camera, which allows you to stop video. But also, if you're talking and you're the speaker, I think maybe this happens even if you're not the speaker, but you will see little green lines pop up and down in the microphone. That tells you your microphone's working. So you can actually diagnose and fix problems in the video feed or the microphone right here from here. You don't have to stop and leave the meeting or do anything complicated. Now, the next important one as we move to the right is manage participants. And manage participants causes the participants column on the right-hand side to appear or disappear. Then there's sharing screen, which I'm doing now, and recording. And the other things we're not going to talk about today. So the toolbar appears at the bottom of the screen when you move the mouse. The Manage Participants button causes the sidebar, the right-hand column, to appear or disappear. Now, you probably already know, and we'll talk about it again, that there's a speaker view, which is really just the speaker and maybe one other person. And then there's gallery view, which is everybody. You can also set the window to full screen. And I think I went through most of this stuff. And I've already mentioned in another talk about looking into the camera to simulate eye contact, to make it seem like you're really paying attention to those people on the other end of the connection. It's simulated, but TV anchors do it every night. Now, here's a simple meeting. It's just me and my wife, and we're testing things. And right now there's 2 participants, so the window is easy, and the speaker view just shows me and the one other person. This is a snapshot from the guitar group that I'm in. We're doing some Zoom meetings every week, and this is what gallery view looks like. Most of you have seen something like this. Some computer-specific details here. If you're on a computer, one of the problems we've had with people is that people don't understand about how windows on a computer are stacked. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here for a minute and try to explain this. The model of a desktop computer like Windows or the Mac is a desktop. And they call them that not because this was back in the days when computers filled whole laboratories. What they wanted was a model that looked like a person's desk. And what happens on a person's desk is you've got papers stacked up. And you can always see the paper that's on top, and you may see a paper that's next to it, but the stuff that's underneath you don't see very well or at all. So the model in Windows and other things is you can tile or stick windows on top of each other. And if you want to see the whole window, you click on it and it comes to the front. It's kind of like pulling the paper out of the deck and putting it in front. Now, computer guys call this the Z order, and this is a little bit of algebra, a little Cartesian math. You know, we have X, which runs along the bottom of the screen, Y, which runs at the top. Z is the angle coming out towards you like a 3D movie. So if you've got a bunch of applications stacked up, the thing you're looking for might be hidden underneath the applications you're running. The first thing I recommend you do when you start a meeting is close all those other applications. Just get out of them. And don't just minimize them, because if you play around, they can come back. I would say just close those dogs and don't go there until you need them again, because that just simplifies your world. However, both Windows and the Mac have a really nice way of switching to some other window. And what you do on Windows is you find the Alt key, and there's 2 of them on the keyboard. I use the one under my left thumb. Hold it down. Now, don't do this while I'm talking, because I don't want you to disappear, but you hold down the Alt key and you tap the Tab key. And what will happen is a window will pop up showing you all of the top-level windows that are available for you to choose, and as you tap Tab, it'll select different windows. And when you let go of Tab, the window you had selected will become your top-level window. And on the Mac, it's almost exactly the same behavior, but it's called Control Tab. Command Tab. Command is the button with looks like a clover leaf under your left thumb. So what happens is you're choosing which of the top-level windows, because what can happen is, because Zoom has 2 windows, you can wind up with the Zoom window with the date and time, the main window as I call it, on top of the video window. You think, well, how do I get rid of it? Well, just click on the video window. Or if you bring your email up for a second because you heard an email come in, well, now how do you get it back? Just click on the window or use Alt-Tab to switch back to it. And again, this is something you should play with after the presentation. Now I'm going to go back to sharing the screen, and here we go. Now, screen sharing is really cool. I actually helped the guy who runs our guitar group get up on Zoom by sharing his screen with me, and I took control of his screen and fixed his computer. And then I helped him too by telling him where to click and what to click, because I could see his screen. What I'm doing right now is sharing my screen with you while I'm running PowerPoint in presentation mode on my computer. And it's a wonderful thing, and it isn't very hard to learn, and you can share all kinds of things. You don't have to just be sharing your single window. You can share any window, or you can share the entire screen. So there's lots and lots of options, but it's very simple, and all I'm really doing is sharing, and then I stop sharing. And when you do share, you get this little thumbnail image over on the right, and you can control how many people you see in the thumbnail image. Right now, because I'm an egomaniac, I'm only looking at me. But you should play around with sharing. I highly recommend you adopt the model of a 5-year-old and have a play date with a friend and sit around and play with all this stuff when there's nothing, no expectations, when you don't have to get any work done, and just see how it works, because the main way human beings learn is through trial and error. Now we're going to talk about recording. And I know that most of you think you're never going to do this. I got it. But there's things that are nice to know. Recording is easy. You just turn it on. You can pause or stop recording. When you're all done, it converts the file to MP4, which simply means it's a standard MPEG-4 movie, which is the default standard for all video on the internet right now today. So it makes the most standard kind of video image you want. If you want to play with that, you need a video editor. However, whether you use the video or the audio, these files are generally too large to email. So you have to put them up in a cloud like Dropbox or Google Drive. And we here in TLC can use our G Suite account, or if you have your own Gmail account, you can use that. And what you do is you can upload it to your Google Drive and then get a link, a shareable link, and send it to somebody else, and she can download it. So this is actually quite easy and one of the best features of Zoom. Now, here we go. You're attending a meeting. Once again, what are your action items? Close every program you don't need. Mute yourself if you're not actively participating. In other words, if you're not talking, just mute yourself. It's polite. It keeps you from making noise. There have been instances where people have dropped things and taken the speaker control because they made noise when they really didn't intend to. If you're not muted, it's kind of like, being in church. Don't make noise or talk or have noise around you. Mute your phone. Just be aware of your ambient surroundings. And the best way to do that is, if you're not actively engaged in asking questions or communicating with somebody or the speaker, be muted. Why not? You can turn off your video or change your background if you want to. There's other things you can do that's like raising your hand. I don't like slower and faster because we're mostly doing video, but there are some yes/no questions you can ask or respond to. And you may be asked to share your screen. In other words, if I were to do some technical problem solving, I might be able to help you by getting you to share your screen with me and see what I can see and figure it out. Viewing options. We pretty much all know what these are right now, but the third one is probably not something you all have tried. The speaker view mostly just shows you the speaker and one other person or nobody. The gallery view shows you everyone. And that's up to about 49, I think, is the gallery limit. That's 49 plus the speaker. So that's a limit of 50. That's a technology limit. And then there's side-by-side mode. If I'm sharing my screen with you and you still want to see the video feed, including my lovely face and anyone else who happens to be there, you can change the viewing options to go to side-by-side mode. Again, a good thing to play with when you make a play date with your favorite Zoom buddy and toy around with all these things you're learning today. Being a host. Now, I've heard some people express trepidation about being a host. There's nothing to be afraid of. It really just means that you started the meeting. It doesn't mean you have to control everything. And right now, I'm doing this myself, largely because I paid for a Zoom account because of the various activities I'm involved in. So the host is the person who starts the meeting. If you're going to be a host or you're going to use slides, use a real computer. Tablets and phones, not so much. Phones especially are very limited. And plug it in. Don't have your battery run down or have to jump up in the middle and deal with that. One of my mottos about hosts, whether you are a presenter in a rec center, whether you're on stage at the Grand Ole Opry, or whether you're just trying to sing happy birthday to your grandchildren, is take control. Don't let people sit around and chatter. That's why I'm muting this, because I want a good video. We'll do questions and answers when I'm all done here. But I can see and mute and unmute different people as I choose. if I were giving a more interactive talk, I could actually stop and see who raises a hand and say, okay, what is it you have to say, and answer questions. The host can share screens, and the host can record video and audio. I think the host can also give someone else the right or the ability to record audio. Again, longer meetings with more than two people require a paid account. And I wouldn't generally have one account and share it, because it's usually tied to one of your email accounts. And to share it, you typically have to give somebody else your email password, which I would never do. One big motto that everybody who uses Zoom a lot has come to learn is don't waste meeting time fixing people's technical issues. If people have a lot of technical issues, have a separate pre-meeting. Now, we here in TLC have had a bunch of these. Bonnie ran a whole lot of them to get people on board, and then we had several other meetings. So we really don't need pre-meetings. Most everybody's jumping on okay, but if you get people that haven't done it, don't bore everyone else with a problem you may really not be able to solve. You could wind up in some dark alley that you have no idea what's wrong, and you've spent 10 minutes boring everyone to tears trying to fix it. And don't hesitate to mute people. If somebody has a live mic and all of a sudden their dog comes in the room and starts yipping, just mute them, because it's for everyone else's benefit. Now, I'm going to talk a little about security here. First of all, Zoom has improved. The biggest single indictment of Zoom, and I read a whole bunch of articles, was that they didn't require passwords. Well, to my mind, not requiring a password is like leaving your front door not only unlocked, but open. So I think that's on the people who got Zoom bombed. You must use passwords. Don't use this personal ID thing. That's another one of these Zoom things that I don't like. Also, when you get an invitation like the one I sent out, yes, there's a link that you can click on, but I never use the links. I just go to Zoom, click on join in the main window, and enter the ID and password I got in the email, and bingo, I'm on. I don't have to download anything or install anything or any of that stuff. I just get on. And most of all, no system is perfect. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about security because everyone is concerned. The main thing I'd like to say is, wasn't it, who was it? I think it was Bruce Schneier, who said, security, get over it. You know that Equifax was hacked and over 300 million American accounts were stolen and sold, right? And of course, they didn't have to pay a nickel. The US government did not require them in their infinite wisdom to actually cough up the several $billion that should have been done for that kind of failure. And virtually every bank, virtually every institution has been hacked, which means a lot of the data is out there. There's no easy way to prevent it. And for people to be worried about Zoom privacy after the Equifax hack is a little bit like, worrying about where your next cocktail is coming from when your house is on fire. Most of us don't even realize how badly we're hacked. The good thing is most of us don't have enough money or enough presence that anybody's really going to care to come after us. Okay? This is why Macs are supposedly more secure than Windows machines. Why? Because they're 10% or 5% of the population. If you want to write a virus, are you going to write a virus that affects 6.5% of the people or 96.5% of the people? Of course, you're going to write for Windows. So security is an important issue. I just don't see Zoom as being something that's going to cause a problem. If you are concerned, set up a dummy Gmail account or a dummy Hotmail account under the name of, number one Gizmo from Kansas, and log in under that name and wear a mask. I really don't think there's a big issue here. The bigger issue is when we put the resulting videos on YouTube, whose name appears? Well, several of you already have your names on our infamous website, which I and Bonnie wrote. Most of you have your names available through the National Social Workers Database, through Florida licensed counselors. I have a YouTube channel with my name and my guitar all over it. So if you're really, really concerned, the actual answer is just don't do it. That's why we're going to start warning people that if you really want to be sure not to have your information shown in a video that can be available publicly, don't go to the meeting, watch the video, okay? Maybe at some time we'll have a meeting where people can come in and know that we're not going to record it. We should always indicate in the beginning if we're recording or not recording a video. But I would say that Every time I've seen one of these newer technology things come in, there's always someone who says, oh, what about security? And, you know, that's a good question, but in the end, it's not as clear cut as people think it is. And if you really knew how much information is available on the dark web, it would be very frightening. There are several things I can recommend, but if I were to put in order the computer security things I would recommend you to do, Zoom would be somewhere around the 19th or 20th on the list. There's a whole lot of more important issues I would have than worrying about that. Okay, I will pause this advertisement now and go back into my presentation. Okay, what are we going to do? Well, in the days of COVID, and even before, I was recommending to Pat that I get a camera and start recording some of these things in rec centers and start building a presence on YouTube or on our own video channel, but I prefer to use YouTube since it's a lot less work. And I really wanted to see what we could do in that. And I knew that there were kind of two things we needed to do. One was we had to spiff up how the presentations were given and who gave them, and really start, you know, having a more of a ship-shape way of going about doing these things. And the other is just the technology of recording, editing, uploading, marking, distributing. And those are not hard. So I created a YouTube channel that's called TLC Services Villages. And on a YouTube channel, is the simplest thing you can imagine. It's just a flat list of all the things all the videos you can watch. That's all it is. It's worse than it's about like a 1960s, you know, television thing. There's NBC, CBS, ABC. All you can see is the things in order. You don't have to watch them in order. That's the only real difference. The big difference on YouTube is I can put up a video and I can mark it as public, meaning anyone who stumbles into the YouTube channel for TLC can watch that video. Or I can put it up as unlisted, which means it's there and it has an address, a URL as we call it, a unique special address on the web, unlike any other. But anyone with that address can view it. So if somebody has that address, they can email it to all of Russia, and all of Russia can watch the video. So it's unlisted only insofar as we don't really expect anyone to spread it around. And if they do, we expect that almost everyone will simply say, why would I ever watch that? I've taken some time and trouble to try to make a TLC brand out of the video. Those of you who've seen the videos know that they begin with some guitar music and Ron Clark's great picture of the Spanish moss on the trees over on 466, and the TLC logo. And if it's a Your Keys combined effort, the Your Keys video comes in, and image comes in, and then it leads into the video. So I want to have these looking the same, sounding the same, so that they look like they actually had some quality. And I must say at this point, I deem myself to be the wizard of quality. And I hope to be able to put everything up on YouTube. I'm not going to be that picky about it, but I really want TLC to work towards doing video and giving presentations correctly. Because my belief is, if you're giving a good presentation, making a good video is easy. If you're not giving a good presentation, you cannot make a good video. The additional steps necessary to make it videoable are very simple. And that's what we're going to talk about now. And the reason I'm going to get into this editing thing is because if you know what happens to a piece of video after a meeting, then you'll understand why certain behaviors are important. So what can you do with a video? Well, it's pretty much like you'd expect. The same thing you used to do with an old moviola. You've all seen those things in 1930s movies where they're leaning over this machine and there's tape, this film going through it, and they're getting a pair of scissors and they clip here and they clip there and they get out the glue and they glue it together. That's kind of what I do. I can trim the beginning and ending. I can remove unwanted segments, like when somebody's shuffling paper or somebody forgets what to say next. That's difficult. It's not difficult, it's just tedious. I can block video segments. That's even harder. And then I can improve the audio quality. That I have been working on. That's kind of mechanical now. But these are the things that I do along with putting on the branding to make a video ready for YouTube. And understanding what happens here can improve videos. So there are simple behaviors that can be exhibited by the host or speaker to help produce good videos. Now, I'm making a distinction here between host and speaker because the people at Your Keys, particularly Maureen, is hosting these videos with her Zoom setup, but the speaker is a TLC, so they don't have to be the same person. It really depends on what the host wants. So what you want in your video, in your presentation too, by the way, is to give your session a clear starting point. And as I told Bonnie earlier today, this is the same thing as going around a meeting room in the 70s, right? You call a meeting to order, everybody comes in with some pieces of paper, they're all drinking coffee and flirting and telling jokes. And finally, at some point, you have to say, okay, folks, we're ready to go. Please give me your ear, or whatever you want to say. It's no different than that. You just want a nice, clean little thing where you mute everybody, take a couple of deep breaths, you introduce yourself and the topic, and you start. Likewise, you want a nice, clear ending point. Today, for example, I'm going to have a nice, clear ending point before I take Q&A, and then after the whole thing is over, because I don't know if we're going to upload the Q&A or not. It really depends on how much Q&A there is and whether they were relatively germane or interesting, or whether we just got some small questions that were better answered offline. If you have to do something more complicated, you can have a simple agreement about how you're going to do it. Like if we're going to do the two different kinds of Q&A. For example, the Your Keys people want to do some prepared questions, and then they want to have some unscripted Q&A, and they want to keep the prepared questions and have the unscripted Q&A and go away in the video edit. That might take a little more work, but the main thing is simply to give your poor video editor a clear starting point and a clear ending point, which your presentations should do, because the ending point is important. People have to know, can they get up and leave now, or can they ask a question now? So not having clear beginnings and clear endings is a violation of basic meeting rules. It's not just about videos. Okay. I believe all of our Zoom meetings should have this mandatory disclaimer, which we're in the process of wording, which says, in effect, the only way to guarantee you won't be seen is not to participate. The recorder should use speaker view so that on the video, it's really only the speaker who is seen on the video inset window. The host should mute all participants so that the video itself doesn't have interruptions. Unless you really want a dynamic presentation, there may be times when we want a sort of a forum type video where everyone's talking. That's great, but that's not what we're doing today. There's an option that says that the recorder can hide non-video participants so that they don't show up at all. So someone who's not showing her video simply disappears. And in an effort to move toward privacy, first names only sounds like a good idea. Okay. That is the gist of my talk today. I know I've covered a lot. I want to emphasize that hopefully when this goes up on YouTube and I send out copies of my slides, you can go back to particular slides, look up the data, watch the video again, and then just sit down and let your fingers do the walking. Search for somebody who's got a little more detail. And more than anything, do a friendly meeting. Call somebody and say, can I have a little meeting? And you just have a meeting, and then you try this stuff. You try recording, you try watching the video, you try being a host, you try setting up your schedule, because none of this stuff is intuitive for anybody. I didn't know Zoom from bananas when I got onto it the first time. I mean, I had done Skype and this and that, but everyone is different. My position is simply, the reason children learn quickly is because they have a very no-fault model in their minds. They say, I'm playing. I'm a kid. And you can't hurt anything. You're not going to hurt anything. The worst you're going to do is annoy somebody who's probably going to annoy you right back. So my view is, be exploratory and try these things. I'm hoping that they work. Bonnie and I and Maureen and a couple of others are trying to take the brunt of the effort of getting everybody on board with Zoom. But honestly, I just don't think it's hard enough problem that no one else can do it but us. I really don't believe that. And I think that the attendance today is to some degree proving that. And at this point, I'm going to end the formal presentation, and I'm going to unmute everyone, much to my chagrin. Thank you very much for your attendance.